The Battle of Britain is about to begin.
Deep right, we got tanks up there. Let's follow a range on deep right. I'm doing out right on the target right now. I've got a fucking right in front of me. I'm going after it. Right, I got him.
Welcome back to the Lead Pursuit Podcast. Tonight, we're going to bitch and complain. And I realize that really shouldn't surprise any of our listeners. But we're going to talk about Adepticon 2024, the tournament for Blood Red Skies, and some of the, as I'll call it, tournament fallout after the fact as people ask questions. So let's skip all the bullshit. We've got Steve. How you doing, Steve?
I'm great. Are we bitching about rules or bitching about cheating? Which one?
I don't know. We're bitching about everything. Brett,
Oh, okay.
good to have you on tonight. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. And I just like to say, let's make the Fiesler Stork great again.
Yeah, okay, you can take that stork model and shove it squarely up your ass. We are not doing a stork model, so enjoy it. Enjoy that. All right, so we're going to skip all the other bullshit. We're not going to talk about upcoming events, cool new paints we've tried, the latest stork model that's out there that Brett wants LPP to design. No, we're going to go straight into the bitching and complaining. All right, so what happened? You've probably listened to our Adepticon 2024 episode. And you've heard us talk about some of the questions that came up. And then, of course, you heard Steve and I on our doctrine card walk-off. Is that what we're going to start calling it, Steve?
Yeah, I like that. I think that's good. We could do a couple mic drop episodes on doctrines.
Exactly. Doctrine mic drop. So we're going to do another one of those about some other traits and doctrines. But you heard us argue about aggressive tactics and a little bit about the changing of the rules, but not a whole lot, because I wanted to cover it for this episode when we all got together to bitch, complain, and say what was on our minds. Well, all right, a couple questions or a couple issues came up, and we're not going to address them. Let me list them first. So, Steve, Brett, shut the fuck up. Nobody cares about your opinion right now. We're just going to list the issues. So here's what came up. First of all, the definition of what is closest fighter as called out in the errata to the aggressive tactics doctrine card. For closest fighter, for biggest threat, any other thing. What the fuck does closest fighter mean? And we're going to talk a little bit about why the fuck did you introduce this idea? What has this done to the game by putting this in the errata? All right. Then we're going to talk about scenario 2. So if you don't remember, scenario 2 is fighter sweep, and it has a wide variety of setups. And we're going to talk about what happens when the dice go cold to everybody. Both players have disadvantaged elements. How do you place people on the board? Because if you follow the rules, you can't do it in a lot of cases. Then we're going to talk about high cover placement in that scenario, because also there's a pretty good percentage chance that both players will have high cover elements. And that introduces a little bit of failure because a lot of the scenarios have not been designed and tested to have both players with high cover. And how does the interaction work for that? So we're going to talk a bit about that. And then we're going to kind of talk a little bit about minimum board size for a tournament. Because here at LPP, we've been pretty fucking naive. We really have believed that a lot of this stuff was played out on multiple board sizes, and when things were said in the rule book that they actually have been tested. But I think we've pretty much proven that's not the case. Anything else that you two assholes saw in the tournament that you want to bring up? Brett, anything else we want to talk about?
I know nothing. I see nothing.
Exactly. It better not be about a stork. We're not talking about scenario 10. You in scenario 10, we'll get to you later. Steve, anything else you want to bring up in your rant?
Man, you know what? You're on a roll. I don't want to interrupt your train of thought. You just keep on going.
All right. Well, then we're going to continue. So here's my rant, and this is going to start this entire bitch session. I thought I'd learned my lesson previously, and that lesson is don't engage in the ready room, and certainly don't talk about rules, because here's the deal. Ken and Andy had beat that out of me over the last few years to the point that literally, let me be honest, I almost left the ready room several times because it's a bunch of groupthink and fanboyism without any determined effort to make the game better. And I want to harp on that. The game better. Not to fix something broken, but just to iteratively make the game better. Okay, case in point, because you're going to say, Doug, when did this happen? I don't believe you. You're full of shit. You're just a wanker. All right, 3 years ago, we asked, can we have a methodical way or a single point of contact for adding topics to the FAQ and errata? Everything is still up to Andy, just for a whim. And if he notices in the Facebook conversations, he might make it an FAQ. There's no master list for FAQ and errata. We have a master list for shitty little biplanes being put in this game, but we don't have a master list for FAQs and errata to the rules. Tell me how that's going to work out. All right, I got it. Andy's a busy guy. He just released another game, and good on him. He's now working on K-47. He has a lot of things going on. Sure would be nice if somebody at Warlord Games or somebody in the Ready Room admins took on the job of keeping track how often an issue comes up, and then can push that to Andy and say, hey, I know you've been busy, but like 7 different times people have asked about what the fuck does closest airplane mean in the errata. And then we can say, maybe we need to fix that, or just fucking remove it. Anyway, so what did I do to transgress? Why am I all pissed off? All right. Well, after a lot of back and forth over scenario 2 and what is, quote, valid placement, I made the comment that apparently the scenario hadn't been playtested on a 3x3 board since the game has been in circulation for years and this issue just came up. How is that possible? And of course, I also mentioned those lovely rules for agile multi-engine fighters, which I know, Steve, you love those rules, don't you? Those are your fucking favorite kind of airplane to play in the game, right?
I think once I complete my doctorate, I will be able to officially fly a multi-engine aircraft. I do not have the intellectual capacity right now. Is that
part of your thesis that the rules break down?
It is. I'm going to work it into my thesis somehow.
Yeah, so let's be honest, guys. This wasn't play tested well. The rules for that are not good. And in fact, we know they weren't play tested. So people can make whatever excuses they want. The people that were responsible have admitted the rules were not play tested. Okay. So after that, it was pretty much caused a game designer explosion in the Ready Room. Andy was so nice to inquire as to, hey, Doug, what's your favorite aircraft? And then after I gave him a couple answers, he threatened to nerf it in the next errata. Yeah, nice work, Andy. Thanks for the level of maturity. That's awesome. You've become a master of how to shut down any discussion from people who are not just fawning over you. That's just that. Why waste our time with that, Andy? Okay, so I'm back to my old plan. Fuck it. No more rules discussions in the Ready Room. No more discussions of tactics there. No more attempts to make the game better for the players or to give them friction points to look out for. You're going to have to hear it on the Lead Pursuit podcast because we're not bringing it up in the Ready Room. All right. Rant complete. But you know what? We've got another rant that I hope is just warming up. Steve, have you warmed up your aggressive tactics rant?
Towards nearest enemy, in quotes. That's what it says. All right. Towards nearest enemy. No clarification. Enemy fighter, enemy bomber, enemy ground target, enemy neoprene ship target, if anybody out there still has them. Towards nearest enemy. Number one, what does that actually mean? Right? What does that mean? Number two, why? I mean, I don't even know what else to say. Why? Right? So if I am playing this game and I am trying to maneuver my aircraft to shoot down somebody else's aircraft, I cannot count how many times it is not the nearest enemy. Why? That's my question. Why? What is the logical reason for adding towards nearest enemy to the aggressive tactics doctrine card?
Rant complete. All right. So, Brett, you haven't had to rant, and I know you're not a ranter. So, We're going to ask you the
Doug,
first question.
Doug turned towards the nearest enemy and got jalapeno juice in his pee-pee hole or something. I don't know.
There's an image nobody needs. All right. So, Brett, you saw we were sitting there. We were both the talking heads at the Adepticon tournament, and we've done that a couple times now, and we've played tournaments. What does nearest enemy have to do with anything for fucking aggressive tactics in your mind? If we're stepping back, we've ranted, we've vented our spleen, but we're going to step back and go, why would it have to be nearest enemy? Is there a better way to define it than nearest enemy? Is it distance? Is it aspect? What the hell?
Well, I guess my first question is, why was that incorporated? Is it because aggressive tactics was perceived to be too powerful?
Man,
you're
my straight man tonight. I got to start paying you for teeing up these questions. You tee them up faster than a game of t-ball. So here's what I've been told. Now, once again, I'll throw the challenge out there. Andy Chambers, Ken Nat, the people that changed these rules, you tell us why it changed. You tell us why we made the aggressive tactics change. Because what is said is too many people were just playing aggressive tactics. Now, I would say based on what? Did you ask Lead Pursuit? Did you come to Lead Pursuit and go, man, you guys sit at more tournaments than we do? And in fact, Andy Chambers, how many of you sat at in the last year? Adepticon 23, Warlord Games Day? Sat at any other tournaments? You watched any others streamed? Because we've been at more events, and I think we don't feel aggressive tactics is overplayed or incorrectly played. I think Steve and I would both agree that it tends to be people's first go-to card, that it's something that people grab onto. But once someone's played the game a couple times with different traits and different aircraft, they get comfortable doing other doctrines. So is the reason that it is overpowered, overplayed, too valuable? Steve, yes, sir.
All right. I don't want to piggyback on another rant before this one's done, but I believe this falls into my category. And as Brett usually likes to say, get good. Get good at the game. Just like it is I believe it is a perceived flaw that is not accurate, that is perceived by people that are not spending enough time learning the game to explore more of the advanced concepts of it. And that's what I think it is. There are things in this game that when you are just starting, one of them being boom chits being acquired too fast and the game ending too early. That is not a legitimate problem once you learn the game.
Correct.
The aggressive tactics being overpowered, not a legitimate problem once you get a few more reps in with the game. And if I could, if I was going to boil all this stuff down into kind of one rant, right? The game is so simple that people play it 3 or 4 times and they think they are an expert on the game.
Yes.
All right. So you play it 3 or 4 times and you go, oh man, this game is so easy. I'm an expert, without peeling back all the other layers of the onion to realize, oh man, there's a lot of depth here that I have no clue about. Kind of, I can akin this to COVID vaccines came out. Now I'm an expert, right? It's like blood red skies. I learned the rules. Now I'm an expert. That's kind of what's happening.
I think we saw it even in the ready room today with the question about compression issues as a doctrine card. And I'm playing a doctrine card, but I'm playing it on an enemy who dives. And so it's a reaction. So how does the bonus card get played? Do I get the effect of the bonus? So there's people who've played the game for years and still don't understand the rules as written for those interactions. That I play a card as a reaction. I can play another card with it as a bonus card, but if I'm not diving, I don't get the effects of Great Dive. Neither does the enemy. Nobody does. Just gets thrown away as a bonus card. So all those things are only understood when you play the game a lot. And I'm going to harp on that one, because here's the deal, and I'll throw the gauntlet down. Ken, Nat, you don't fucking play this game as much as Steve and Brett and I. So here's the deal. I appreciate your opinion, bro. You're a player like anyone else, but you gotta put a ton of reps in currently to be able to keep that voice being the voice of how the game really is. Because a lot of cards have been added, a lot of aces have been added, a lot of combos are now more complex, and there's answers to them. So the deal is you got to keep playing, not playing it solo, playing it with a thinking opponent who's challenging you. And that's how you really build an opinion about what cards are overpowered and how they work over time. Now, I'll say, here's the deal. I'll take some blame on LPP. We haven't told people the overarching multi-year results of the tournaments. You know what? Cool. I'll crunch those numbers. We'll see what the top winning airplanes and top winning doctrines are, and we'll go through it all in another episode. But we know from experience that that's not where the problem is. It's not. You're not going to see aggressive tactics being the winner every single time. Not the case. Not from what we've seen. All right.
You know,
So,
I'm gonna
okay.
piggyback straight away on that, right? Like if we're gonna go down that route, right? Tight turn is said to be the best trait, bar none, right? You're not gonna see there's not an overwhelming number of tight turn aircraft winning these games at tournaments. All right.
And I laugh about it. I joke. I do call it the cheater doctrine just because it's defying the set laws of physics of the game. But it is not the one switch beat all. How do you the only way to play a game is with tight turn, because we've seen denial lists do very well, and we've seen great dive robust lists do very well. So there's a lot of ways to win this game. And the point is, the trick is, A, you get good, B, put your opponent in a box, whether it's psychologically putting him in that box and fooling them into making mistakes, or use the game and the advantage mechanic to put them in the box to where they're now disadvantaged and they're just easy meat for your gunners. Brett, I know you're just dying to dive in here. You got that look.
Man, I feel like Steve and I got to warm up the tabletop simulator and get back at it.
I think you do, and that's the point. So let's explain that to everybody, because people don't necessarily remember how many reps you guys put into tabletop sim playing denial list versus tight turn Spitfire list. So it was generally 109. I think you went through E's and then F's, right, Brett? For your guys. And Steve, you were spit 1-2s. Did you get it to 5s? I can't remember.
Hurricanes.
Oh, you
the
went,
whole
yes,
deal.
you went Hurricanes.
Yep.
Yeah. So you two assholes have a lot more reps even than I do. And you guys have seen this, and you've seen your own skills develop over time, where you get good at the game and you understand how to play certain kind of lists. And then as we've all
despite
done,
all those reps, looking back on all those games we played, I still can think of, oh man, there's certain aspects of the way I play that I've got to improve on, despite the number of reps. Like even just the reps, like after a break, it's like, oh man, I was doing this thing wrong. I need to get better at that.
Dude, yeah, it's totally, there's a lot of times that we go, oh man, I missed these opportunities where this doctrine card would have worked, or this combo. And the fact is, if you don't play and analyze your play, you're just never gonna see that. It just
Man,
cracks
Doug,
me up. So
I'm feeling like I almost want to hop. I don't know, maybe Roll20 is a little easier to play than Tabletop Sim, even though it doesn't have all the bells and whistles. I almost want to start some kind of like Roll20 grudge match, like weekly grudge match in Blood Red Skies, where anybody could just like call somebody out on the ready room and throw down on Roll20 and really start to like experiment on some of these rules things that people argue about.
yeah, I think we have to figure out a way to model the advantage standard, model it with tokens or whatever. But yeah, I think there's absolutely, there needs to be much more playing before commenting, I guess is my point. Because like you said, people play it, they understand it, they go, man, this is a simple game, and they think they've mastered it. And you're just digging in if you haven't played with aces and multiple aces and different traits, and all those kind of things. And I'm just going to go back and bring up looking at just last year's Adepticon. Last year's Adepticon alone, when you look at what kind of aircraft fell out in the top. Yes, we did have Spit 5Bs. Shocker. I would be surprised if you didn't have a tight turning airplane there, because once again, tight turn, those doctrines are easy to play. So it's a surprise if one of them doesn't show up in the top. But let's take a look at the other aircraft here. So let me pull up that.
I'm actually glad you worded it like that too, Doug, right? The tight turn aircraft are easier to play, right? They're not better. They're not stronger. No. They're just
it's
easier
to get to that tailing solution or whatever you're looking for. Those are not, as you've said, you can be sloppy with a tight turn airplane and still get to a point of advantage where someone playing a different, either non-tight turn or no stalling, without those two, they have to play much more precisely. But it's the same principles. You're still playing the same rules to get to a position of advantage. So let's see here. So the other aircraft that were in the top three were, wait for it, F6F Hellcat. Okay, so it's a rapid roll, not a tight turn. We've talked about that. A rapid roll and robust aircraft. So that one is another one of those what I call kind of tweeners in there. Let's see. And the other aircraft were up there were the mighty LA-5FN. Rapid roll, poor quality. So we had the top three aircraft. Two of them were rapid roll, not even a tight turning aircraft. That's a huge distinction, I think. And, oh, by the way, not with aggressive tactics as their doctrine. So I don't know. It's one of those tough ones. People want to judge. Let's go back another year. Let's see here.
I would almost say poor quality is one of the most overpowered traits in the game, right? Like poor quality is basically decreases that points number and is no disadvantage at all. Like that might actually be something that's really worth a look at the errata, the poor quality.
So we're all gonna laugh about this. What was the winning plane out of Adepticon 2022? The F4F Wildcat. The Wildcat, a robust only airplane. So I laugh because guess what? The number 2 aircraft, unfortunately disqualified because he's an LPP douche, was Steve Toth with the F4F Wildcat also. So how about that? Top 2 players in the tournament were both F4F Wildcats in 2022. So it tells me right then. And what did they beat out? They beat out a tight turning airplane. They beat out a no stalling airplane. They beat out Brett in your denial list. Sorry. But Brett, you were up there in 3rd place in that denial list. And then the mighty N1K2J, I forget what its traits are off the top of my head. Its traits are tight turn. So it was a tight turn heavy hitter, and it came in next to last. How about those apples? So 2 robust airframes beating all the others, and literally not a tight turner in the top 3 or really the top 50% of this. So what was it based on? I don't know. Based on somebody's gut feeling, somebody being butthurt that the planes weren't being played the way they should. I don't know. I think the nerfing of or the changing of aggressive tactics has now made it harder for people to understand the rules, because the beauty of Blood Red Skies, it doesn't create all these edge cases with weird wording. It literally just makes it simple. Do what you want. Pick a pilot action. Play some cards. All right. Any other rants about aggressive tactics and nearest fighter? Because we could talk all day about what if I want to use 90 degrees of turn to shoot the guy that's not the nearest fighter. The nearest fighter is maybe directly behind me, but yet I have aggressive tactics, and now I want to turn 90 degrees and shoot this dude right beside me. Why not? Why should I be penalized?
What if you're turning to aggressively move like across the board totally to somebody else, right? Like you could do aggressive tactics and then dive to fly, however many inches you want to fly. Like that's pretty aggressive, right?
Yeah. I mean, because that could be another rendition of aggressive tactics is I want to use these two together to get a bonus 45-degree turn, before moving, and then burn advantage, do my tight turn, play that for 45 degrees, dive, now be neutral, and shoot some poor disadvantaged schmo who is 12 inches away from a Spitfire,
Well, that's the same kind of stuff that Steve would play on me, and guess what? Still fun. Isn't that what we're shooting for?
I agree. And thank you. So that's point number 2 or point number 17. I don't know what point number we're on now, but the game's supposed to be fun. If we wanted something complex, we'd play Bag the Hun. We'd play Check Your Six. We don't. We want something's fun, something fast, something intuitive. Because I think, and this is going to be me going out on a limb because it's just why I love the game, it feels fast and intuitive and flying by the seat of your pants. It doesn't feel like I have to think, I have to pre-plot, I have to do all these super cerebral things to play the game. No, man, line up my planes, line up your planes, figure out our advantage, turn and burn and dogfight and whatever, then go play volleyball shirtless on the beach.
Yeah.
But you know, but it feels more like dogfighting in the sense because it's just seat of your pants. It's not like ships moving in the night and pre-plotted movement. Oh wait, I turned left. He turned right. Oh wait, we're not in the same piece of sky. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll tell
I
you
could
what,
rant about
too.
other games.
What you just said, Brett, like the game being fun, something that really started to like make me question this whole thing more recently on the Ready Room. This obsession over you may only play one card per event, per activation, per this, per that, per whatever, right? Like, tell me it's not super fun when somebody stacks like 4 cards in a row against you and pulls off like the freaking super move, right? It's just more
And that's the way
fun.
we'd played for years that way,
Yeah.
whether it's the right way or the wrong way. I think it's super fun because as you've seen, like guys will play all these cards and stack it, and then somebody else will throw a poor quality opponents, and you're like, son of a, now I've got to roll just to see if I can take this shot, and things like that I think are fun because there's an element of aha to it, of kind of gotcha, that you always got to be careful of. And you put all your eggs in one basket, and if your opponent has either a denial list or has cards that are specifically geared as reaction cards, then man, you're sitting there like, oh, I had everything lined up and they threw a poor quality opponents or something at me. So.
Yeah, and I'll admit, like, I know I've been playing it wrong, right? Because I 100%, like, nobody's saying, oh, if you have 4 robust cards, make them like roll 1 die instead of 5, right? Like, obviously that is not the spirit of the rule, right? But I know we've played numerous times where somebody has like, I don't know, like a rapid roll and a heavy hitter, right? Like, why wouldn't you be able to play a rapid roll to get into position and then a heavy hitter
and then,
to shoot? Like, why wouldn't you be able to do that?
I think in my mind, that's why we always played open deck, because 1, it was easier, but 2, you had only you had a small handful of things you could do. You could spend them wisely where you will, but if you want to play rapid roll, turn, move, even burn advantage, dive over there, get close, within 3 inches, play heavy hitter, play superior firepower. And that's always when Brett would be like, yeah, and fuck you, poor quality opponents. And I would fail to roll my check, and I would have all that and done nothing. And I'd now be sitting right in his freaking knickers, not doing anything. So yeah, thanks, Brett.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, it's safe to say, right? Like, more tricks is more fun.
Yeah.
Right? Like, more stuff you can do is more fun. I don't know.
I wouldn't even put it more tricks, more moments where simple interaction, not necessarily just the die roll, because the die roll does determine the outcome, but the simple interaction between the players of the cards. For me, I think that's one of those fun things that I've been able to incorporate in wargaming, because I'm not a Magic player. I don't play games that are cards and reaction cards and all that stuff. But in the context of Blood Red Skies, I do think it's fun when you think you've got that perfect combo set up and you've forgotten, or you just still haven't even seen your enemy play these cards, or they have a theater card that you didn't know was coming, and you're just like, oh, son of a, and we're not so competitive and so win-loss minded that we get pissed about it. I think it's fun. I think it's just one of those moments where you're like, I didn't see that coming. How did I fail that? Or like Steve failing 18 dice of pilot skill checks to get back on the board.
The whole thing with the cards is such a big part of the fun of the list building as well. I mean, I can have a lot of fun figuring out that part.
Yeah. Y'all spend a lot of time thinking about perfect ace skill combinations with doctrines and stuff like that. And that is a whole level of this game that I don't play very well. I'll be the first to admit. I have a very simplistic view of aces and what I want to do. But man, y'all just nerd out about that, which is good, which is a whole nother way of enjoying the game. All right, any more rant complete, or any more rants on aggressive tactics? I think the lead pursuit position is get rid of the wording. We tried it. Nearest fighter doesn't work. Pull it out of the errata. Errata the cards to not say that.
I got called out of the shoutcasting booth to make a call on a table where somebody had a question about which way they could turn with their aggressive tactics. And in my view, the two enemy aircraft that were closest were equidistant. So I told the player, move where you want to, because I don't see any difference between the two.
Yeah. I think it just creates more questions than it answers, and definitely doesn't provide a good solution. So, all right, well, let's move on to scenario 2, which, let me be honest, I thought this was going to be the savior of the Blood Red Skies tournament scene in the U.S. I'm like, all right, we've played scenario 1. Whew, everyone's tired of just lining up their planes, mano y mano, punching each other in the face. We're gonna pick a scenario that's going to create an asymmetric setup to see just how good people are, as if Steve has said, get good. So one of the problems with scenario 2 is when you roll for advantage, it's possible both players could start disadvantaged. Well, not a big deal if it was scenario 1 and you were placing your own fighters. But in scenario 2, disadvantaged aircraft are placed first on the board by the opposing player. Now, here's where the problem comes up. You got a 3-foot by 3-foot board. Therefore, the very center is, drumroll please, 18 inches from the edge of the board. Slightly more diagonally, whatever. You can go into that math. Square root of 2 times 18 inches. But basically, from once you put that disadvantaged element in the center of the board, you have now presented a problem for the other player. The other player, when they're placing your element, is now going to place it somewhere advantageous to you. It might, best case, have just enough room to be able to put it 18 inches away in a corner of the board. All depends how they placed it. And also depends upon the size of the element. If it's a 4-plane element and they place it with 2-inch to 3-inch dispersion, then guess what? You might not be able to validly place anywhere on the board. So that's a problem. And even a 4x4 board can rapidly end up being too small for both players if the first element is placed directly in the center. Because once again, you start getting into this whole discussion of how much room do I have? So it's possible to jam the other player as the first deployer of your enemy's disadvantaged planes, jam them into not being able to put yours in a disadvantaged situation. So that's kind of unfair. If both of you roll disadvantaged and the slowest guy gets placed first by his opponent, then you're rewarding the faster airplane by him getting a better start. Now, Steve's breaking out the rule book as we're talking, so I'm curious what he's going to think here. So here's kind of my discussion on that. I have a hard time believing this scenario was played more than once or twice. And in their defense, they say, hey, we don't remember what board size we came up with. But I'll tell you, I think what it tells me is they didn't play test it competitively. They just kind of played as gentlemen. Oh, wait, we got 2 disadvantaged elements. They're going to have to be 18 inches apart. Now we can, place them in such a way as to be gentlemanly about it. Because the problem is you start getting competitive on a 3x3 board, 18-inch deployments. You start blocking the other player very rapidly from being able to place any aircraft. Steve, what are you thinking? You're looking right at the rules.
Yeah, I just don't like scenario 2. Period. Right?
And that may be the answer.
I don't like it.
The answer is play scenario. So why don't you like it?
I don't know. I guess I shouldn't say I don't like it. For a tournament, I don't like it. I think it's really strange in a tournament setting that you would just purely based on chance, right? How your advantage level stacks out, relinquish where your planes go to your opponent, right? I think it's kind of like a fun thing to play if, like you said, if you're playing like a gentlemanly game, right? Like, hey, let's like kind of see how this works out. I understand.
Fun when you roll that on a campaign, man.
Yeah. I mean, I understand people saying like they don't want to play dogfight, but I mean, I'm going to tell you, Doug, I think it falls into like rule 1A, get good, right? Like,
Well,
I don't know.
yeah, but to me, I think where we're coming to full circle is to where and I'm not answering for any of you guys, just me, where I did not want to be in that we create custom scenarios for tournaments. But I think that's what it's driving us into because we want something that tests people if they don't get the perfect setup. But we don't want to make it such that it's going to be a super hard uphill battle. I mean, I've enjoyed playing scenario 2 in a tournament environment. I will say that it certainly is a teeth suck when you look out at the board and you're like, oh, fuck, what am I going to do on turn 1 to get out of this shit sandwich? And there's a little bit of you just praying that the dice go your way. You're like, I just hope this guy, when he dives across the board and shoots me, that he just misses, or that if he even gets a boom shit on me, that I'm going to roll my dodge. And to be honest, it played into why when I played scenario 2, I played A6 M3s. I literally I needed actually played M3s. I think about that. Was I had chosen my combinations of low firepower, higher agility, correct traits because it was something that I was like I could have a bad start to the game and I don't want to be wanting on the dodge dice. I'd rather, even though I'm vulnerable, even though it has a higher percentage chance to hit me, I don't want to come out lower on the dodge dice like some of the robust aircraft might be with an agility of 1. All right. So let's keep talking about that. What are some of the solutions for it? So, we're going to talk about for LPP, if we continue with scenario 2, minimum mat size is 4x4. I think, like I just alluded to, we may end up finding ourselves in let's come up with some kind of scenario that is custom to LPP, forces people to take some less than optimum setups, but not be super disadvantageous. Because I like the small boards. I like 3x3 boards. There's nowhere to go. It's hard to really escape and get out of the fight. But we'll have to see, and we'll see based upon how we play at Historicon and some of these other places, what we change next year.
What's the in scenario 2? What's the size of the deployment box that's in the center of the table?
If you could read us the exact wording, because there isn't a standard. It's as long as it's within 12. It has to be more than 12 from the edge. So you get to this point where you have to be greater than 12 from the edge, but 18 inches from the other player.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking, I'm trying to visualize like the zone of possible deployment on like the 3x3 or the 4x4. It's a square. If you had a 4x6, does that shape change in a way that makes?
Well, 4x6 causes some other problems. We'll come back to 4x6. 4x4, you now have a 24x24 center mat area. So it is possible, if you're a gentleman and don't deploy in the very center, you can deploy your enemy's fighters in one corner, and he will have roughly 18 inches barely to get to the opposite corner. As long as you tightly pack his fighters, he could put you in the opposite corner. And there's kind of an arc of those that you could have. Now, the problem is you do that on a 3x3. When you come in, you have this small, basically 12x12 box in the center, and there just is no way, because the square root of 2 is 1.4. Multiply that by 12, you don't get to 18. So even if you put yourself in a corner, you can't validly put inside that box. The only way you can do it is to allow the player to deploy outside that box on a 3x3. Does that answer the 3x3 versus 4x4 deployment question? Because it gets weird with 4x6. Because like you, I would have thought 4x6 solves the problem even better, because now you extend it sideways. And then it's the Rhonda factor, and I'm going to blame Rhonda because she did it, and it was funny. Then you get a really weird setup if you put somebody in the opposite corner and facing away. So she did that to her opponent, and I wish I could remember who it was. It took them forever to get those airplanes turned around and flying back into the game. So, because what we've seen in 4x6s, we don't normally deploy the length way away from each other. We still deploy close, the 4 foot way. So it kind of, in a sense, screwed the other player because it put one of their elements way out of the fight. But a valid deployment, not a invalid thing to do to your opponent. All right. other questions.
I think honestly, like you said, and I think I said this at Adepticon, super in favor of like a tournament pack that has designated scenarios for tournaments, right? That's just like,
And
okay,
I
you
think
don't want to play regular dogfight.
We would do some things similar. Like we would take the structure of scenario 2, change a couple things to where it's not your enemy placing it, and basically saying you got to place 9 inches away. So the slower aircraft, we probably would switch it up and say faster aircraft place first or something. We just figure it out because you're now placing. So your disadvantaged guys have to be 9 inches from other disadvantaged, and that's fine. And then once you do that, then you open it up to 18 inches away for everybody else. So you could have this, in a sense, dogfight of disadvantaged guys down low that are going to be close to each other, but everybody else is pitching into the fight. But you're not starting in a bad situation because your enemy didn't place them. Just and limiting it to, we would say in our scenario there'd only be one element from each player max that can be disadvantaged. There's no point in everybody starting disadvantaged. This doesn't make it any fun. All right, let's talk high cover for scenario 2, because even though I think we've all come to the point that we probably need a custom scenario, we should learn from scenario 2 and the ability of everybody to have high cover. What we saw, which we've run into a number of times in our scenarios, but it's never been in a competitive environment. I know, Brett, we saw it in the Malta scenario where you have, as I say, the dog humping high covers. Somebody's high cover moves on the board and the next guy moves in right behind them. So it's not unique scenario 2. Priority target scenario 7 has the same kind of situation. If you are the defender, you probably have a high cover element chasing the enemy bombers along the edge of the table. And when the enemy bombers move on the table, then you tend to just dog hump right in behind them. But there becomes a physical layout problem of how do you put these aircraft on the board? Because the rules say high cover elements take their actions after all other players' aircraft have completed their moves, beginning with the slowest high cover element. So, like from our example, when it was SM-79s, those, based on speed, are the first one to move their 1 inch onto the board. It says move all the planes from that element 1 inch onto the table from the point currently marked so they can join the fight in the next turn. So, move them on the board. Now then, if they've moved 1 inch onto the table, what about the other poor assholes who are right behind them? So then that second faster element, do they have to place it right there? And then do they only move, that zero move? Do they just basically show up on the board and they're in a sense directly behind these guys? Or does it force them to then place out in front of the enemy because they theoretically overshoot? What happens here? And I think it gets really weird because if you have a higher skill, a lower skill, slower airplane, that a higher skilled airplane might all of a sudden be out in front of because it's been an overshoot. So why didn't that guy get to shoot moving on the board as he would have normally? He would have activated behind them, shot, then moved out in front of them, and had to take it for action. So it's just a weird set of rules for that. I don't know if you guys saw on the streaming table, it became an issue as 2 high cover elements both moved on the board together.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I don't think this is an issue. I think if you're the guy that puts your fighters on first, tough shit. The second guy can't come on, right? Like that's.
I think that's unfair.
You're blocking.
I think blocking his element for coming on isn't the right answer. I think that it should then be a compromise of it being bumped left or right so that they come in simultaneous with them. Because just because you're the slower player, why whenever else in Blood Red Skies does the slower player get to make a decision that holds the faster player off?
Yeah, that's really effed up, right? But I have played that way with my guys that are on the board. Like I've intentionally done that where I'm like, no, I'm going to keep a guy like hovering near your high cover marker just so you can't come on. Like I've done that.
Yeah,
right.
And I'm a fan because I've done it to you guys both, where I'll chase your high cover marker, but I never double up with it because to me it's going to create this weird rule situation that I don't want to have to argue through. So I'm just going to come in adjacent to you. And here's the other thing that's kind of rules as written versus rules as intended, and I've seen it played different ways. Um, when you place the high cover marker, do you have to move straight onto the board, or can you move on at an angle? Rules don't say it. Just says move all planes from the element 1 inch onto the table from the point currently marked so that they can join the fight of the next turn. So my attitude in a sense is if I end up in one of these situations where you've moved 1 inch forward, then from that point, can I turn and go 1 inch, in another direction and still move my element on? Probably not, but it's a case of playing a little bit of gamesmanship. What I normally do, and Brett saw this, is I'm a couple inches away, and so you place yours on the table as the slower player. I, as the faster player, place over here. We're both advantaged. No, I can't shoot you immediately unless I outmaneuver you or use some kind of ace skill to drop you down via outmaneuver. But I can also set up the geometry such that I can pull in behind you. So it's
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, Doug. Rule 1A, get good, right? If you got a high cover marker on the board,
rule 1A is not an excuse for shitty rules in the game.
but if you got a high cover, if you're like, okay, I've got a high cover marker and my opponent's got a high cover marker, if you're gonna just sit right next to his high cover marker, I'm kind of under the impression of like, dude, don't be stupid. If that guy goes on the board before you, you can't come on. Like, leave yourself a little space. Like you said, you only got to leave yourself a little space.
That's not at all what the rules say. This isn't 40K. You can't put your bikers all the way around the board and keep someone from, bringing his forces on. The rules don't say anything about, and then that first high cover blocks the other guys. So that's kind of the problem, because the only rule it ever uses for moving on to somebody is overshoot. So that's where I say that to me, it basically causes an overshoot. If you're directly behind that guy, the slower player moves on, then based on the overshoot rule, you're moving on 1 inch as well. That now puts you in front and kicks you out in front of them. Now, it's not the same as a move because you wouldn't have a pilot action that turn. So you're still going to show up in front of them. No tailing at that point. The slower guy's not going to auto tail you, but it sets up a point where they could make a min move that you might still overshoot. All kinds of other craziness could ensue. That's where I say absolutely get good. Have a plan for if you have to jump in behind this guy. Know you're going to overshoot. Know that means you're going to be 1.5 inches off the table edge. Cool, whatever. I'm not going to fly in directly facing forward. I'm going to fly in at an angle just because of that reason. Shit like that. All right. So kind of our proposed solution on that was if you arrive from the same location, slowest aircraft placed first, fastest aircraft placed as close as possible to their high cover marker while still touching the board edge and keeping formation integrity. So that's kind of a proposed scenario. Were we to write our own tournament scenario, that's probably what we would say, because now you still put the slowest element out in front, faster elements behind them. They may still overshoot, they may not, based on whatever angles they played coming on the board. And then once again, this means they can offset to one side or the other of that slowest element and turn into them. That makes it super useful to have like a no stalling or aggressive tactics kind of guy. That if you're that attacker, you can worm your way in. And obviously, as the defender, the first thing you're going to do is make that min move, turn your ass 45 degrees away from the enemy that's now behind you. Just make them overshoot. All right, so the real problem that I'm going to come back to, I'm going to foot stomp time and time again as I come back to the rules. Since you're looking at them, Steve, page 36. Roll over to page 36. You're going to see tournaments and competitive play. This is the rulebook answer on tournaments and competitive play. So this is where I call it out. Tables should be a minimum of 3 feet by 3 feet. If you guys know a 3-foot table didn't support deployment on scenario 2, why does it say 3 feet by 3 feet? I recommend minimum table size, competitive play, 4 foot by 4 foot. No questions asked. But you know what? Some other asshole could put that suggestion in the ready room because I'm done making suggestions in the ready room. Here's my suggestion. Next year, we'll see it different in the tournament rules for the U.S. tournament pack. But I think it needs to be eroded to 4x4 for tournament play if you're using generic scenarios out of the book, which I encourage people to do. I know there's a movement afoot, obviously, in LPP to make custom scenarios. Y'all can kiss my ass, but I guess we're going to have to. But I want people to play competitive games with the scenarios in the book. And I think that has to be a 4x4. All right. we kind of ranted about a couple things. We kind of calmed down a little bit. Uh, you know, Brett, anything that you took out of a Adepticon tournament that was a strategic shift? Anything you saw that suddenly you said, "Oh crap, we've been doing that wrong for a couple of years," or this is a different, um, a different set, a different way that people are playing the game?
Nothing immediately comes to mind except when I watch folks play a play style that's different than my own. Predominantly I'm talking about like the great dive, great climb combination. It reminds me how in my own play, I got to be conscious of, maybe I've got one turn and I got to get the hell out of dodge to come back, right? Zoom away, come back, fight at a different angle. So I'm kind of I was watching people play it. I was thinking, man, if I was playing my 109 Gs, what would I be doing right now? And that, is kind of that constant reminder. Like, I can't do that. I can't fight like a Spitfire with my collection.
Yeah, yeah, and I will be honest. I think this year was an anomaly. That when you rack and stack to include people that had a buy in there, and you see just starting, there were five tight turn airplanes out there, and yes, some of them did well, but I think the real trick is you look at where everybody overall placed, and you looked at there's some non-tight turning aircraft that did very well and placed in third place or in other places in the list above tight turning airplanes. So I think there's a lot to be said for every time you see somebody play, you should be learning. You should be realizing that they're probably executing a play style you don't know very well. And so, like, if you look at some of these other aircraft that are great dive aircraft, watch how they're playing. And even if you might beat them, did you beat them because they were sloppy, or they didn't maximize the combinations of their doctrines and their traits, or did you actually beat them because you had a better list? So I think there's a lot of discussion to be had there. Steve, thoughts?
My single biggest takeaway from Adepticon tournament 2024, the days of gentlemanly, competitive Blood Red Skies tournaments are done. It's gone. Yes. Right? It is. And there was just too much. And I'm not saying that like it's a bad thing. Trust me, I'm not. Right? I think, I know I kind of like when you're playing something competitive. I kind of like that it's competitive. Now, I'm not seeing be like a complete D-bag to the guy you're playing with. Right? But like, I'm going to be honest. We're playing a tournament. You might play 2 or 3 a year. I like that you're kind of trying to screw your opponent on deploying in the corner. I like that you're kind of trying to do these kind of things that are like, hey, I'm playing to win this game. I signed up for a tournament. I'm playing to win. Single biggest takeaway, we as Lead Pursuit Podcast need to, if we're going to stream, we're going to stream, but we need to have somebody a fit refereeing these games in an official capacity that handle stuff in a competitive way when this comes up.
Absolutely. And we've said that time and time again. It's part of the problem of the size of the hobby right now. We're kind of in this transition spot where, yes, Adepticon 2024 was the biggest 16-person event that we've done for a tournament. But we're still not quite where we need with people to stream and be talking heads and be, have a separate impartial judge who's not the people streaming and watching. I'll come back to your point that we've seen now the death of gentlemanly tournaments, and I'm okay with that. I will say that there's a fine line between super competitive and try hard, and I think a good example is like Mike Lewis and I go in there and we play smash face Blood Red Skies. There is no quarter given. We bite each other. We bite our lip when the other guy doesn't play a card or forgets to do something. There's no take backs. There's none of those gentlemanly things that we've seen over the years in BRS tournaments. It is Doug and Mike just trying to beat each other to a bloody pulp. It's like you and me in the grudge match. When we played our 3-round grudge match, there were times both of us made mistakes that the other player was like, He'll say something. He's my own bro on the podcast. This is a competitive game. If he's not at the top of his level, that's his problem. That's not my problem. So I think you're right. I think it can be a good thing. I think the trick, and this is where I really want to put the onus on the players out there, is be competitive, but don't be a douchebag. You know, you don't have to necessarily help the other guy, but if you get to a point where it's obvious the other dude doesn't know what they're doing, those are kind of times to say, all right, I'm already gonna beat the dude. I don't have to beat him into a bloody pulp. You know, be competitive. Don't tell them where their mistakes are until after the game. Show them, hey, you know what you could have done was X, Y, and Z. Be helpful. Be humble about it too, because they may be learning, and it may be kind of an ego slap to them that they got beat down so easily. But say, hey, man, good game. You know, have you tried this? Have you tried using a bonus card with your doctrines? Because they may just not know the rules as well. And I think we want people to come into tournaments and play as young players. I don't think we want them to feel like they have to get to some high level of skill before they get to the tournament. You're not going to place, but the fact is, come out, have fun, play a lot of games, have a good time, drink some beer, drink a non-alcoholic beverage, you know, whatever, have a good time. Because to me, the tournament play, like you alluded to, Steve, you get to this level where you're so focused on playing the game that you actually are paying attention. You're not just hanging out with your buddy. I think narrative games, you tend to hang out with your buddy, and rules get, you know, mismatched, and you make a house rule and whatever. No. This is a tournament play. It's a smash face game. Play by the book and get good. All right.
Play clean while you're doing it.
Yeah, no shit. Play clean. Play clean and don't be sloppy. Because when you're sloppy, and y'all know who I'm talking about, because y'all know yourselves, when you're sloppy, it raises questions about were you sloppy or were you cheating? And we just don't want that, because we know guys aren't cheating, but if guys are playing sloppy, this is the kind of game that has a lot of bumping of models opportunities if you're not careful. So don't play sloppy, be precise. Brett's happy because now he can pull out his little tweezers and his little compass and make sure that the calipers are moving his airplane exactly 45 degrees, right? That's the kind of guy you are. You're a 45-degree caliper guy. All right. Should have known that about you. All right. The last thing I'll say, to circle back, since we've hurt Ken and Andy and Mark's feelings, we'll circle back. And I am going to say, I love y'all like brothers. I don't hate y'all. I'm just mad. And when I get mad, I punch people in the face. I really think you guys played gentlemanly games when you play tested Blood Red Skies. And that's okay. You were generating a narrative system. Now we're at the competitive point. And so I get the feeling that the only competitive scenario was scenario 1 dogfight. Now we're just going to solve the problem. We're not going to sweep it under the rug. We're not going to make it go away. We're going to figure out how we either modify scenario 2 or build our own tournament packet, like Steve's alluded to, so that when people go into a competitive game, it is a good competition, instead of it being less than optimal. You know, and here's the deal. I don't want people to get frustrated with lead pursuit for us sweeping something under the rug or saying it's not an issue, or if, did anyone look at this? Yeah, I want people to know we looked at it. We had to make some changes, and we're going to move forward. We're going to have fun. We're going to keep playing Blood Red Skies. That's the thing. I love playing this game. Frustrations aside, I really enjoy it. You know, but I think we as a community also got to solve the problem of shooting the messenger in the ready room instead of addressing the issue. And I'll kind of leave it at that. With that, Steve, any other parting thoughts?
Get good.
That's right. Get good. Brett, parting thoughts.
Does Blue Falcon Hobbies have any decals for the stork?
I'm going to edit that out. I'm just going to cut that out, and Brett's not going to have any comments on the end of the show. In case y'all haven't heard it, maybe it'll be in the outro. Brett's on a kick for getting Scenario 2 Front Lines back in play. He's, I guess, going to play a little observation plane running around, so we might have to see that in a future episode. The dissection of how to win in Scenario 10 with the stork. But anyway, in the meantime, please keep liking the podcast. Please keep leaving us comments. We really appreciate it. And remember, we cannot save you hundreds on your car insurance, but we sure as hell can keep you from becoming a grognard.
I have a janky-ass Storch model. It's a metal Airtrex, or Skytrex, whatever the hell it's called. the scale doesn't even seem right. Potentially, is that a niche where maybe a new airplane from LPP would have some play? Because nobody has a.
Yeah, right.
Shut the fuck up.
Who has the appropriate models for Scenario 10?
No storks.
They're so cool.
Niche. Yeah, niche of one for Brett. Good idea, Ferry. Shut. Zip it. Got a whole bag of right here for you.